Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today I am going to be doing my Pro-Am bracket predictions for the Pro-Am. This is going to be a more casual kind of just walking you through it. I've actually already made my bracket. I didn't know we were going to have a pick'em thanks to Solomon, so they made it a little bit easier for me to actually be able to get this out in kind of an interesting way. So just casual, kind of general, typical kind of style for me as we get to the Pro-Am, which is going to, of course, be kicking off tomorrow with the first 4 games, the first round, and then Sunday we have the next 3 games. So let's jump in and let's talk about who I think will do well. I'm also going to kind of mix in a little bit of talking about the teams and recapping the games a bit, because I didn't do any kind of Pro-Am video. So the first 2 rounds, or first 2 weekends of it. So I want to talk about the teams a bit and kind of some of the initial first impressions of them as we go. And that'll be kind of what is the thing here. So let's start with the first match, which is the Florida Mayhem and the London Spitfire. Florida Mayhem winning Group A, London Spitfire the runner-ups in Group B. 2 pretty interesting teams. Obviously, they both played in the first weekend of matches, so we haven't seen either of them in about 2 weeks. By the time the tournament kicks off, we want to see them, like I said, for about 2 weeks. So interesting. The Mayhem, of course, beating the Shock in their group, as well as wins over Trick Room, Timeless, and the Vancouver Titans. London Spitfire with a loss to the Atlanta Reign, but wins over Saints, the LA Valiant, and the Vegas Eternal. So 2 teams that I think, generally speaking, did not have the most difficult runs. Obviously, London had to play Atlanta, which was a challenge, and they lost. Florida played a pretty weak Shock team. Some of it, I think, has to do with ping. Some of it has to do with they don't really care as much as some of the other teams do. So kind of a lot to take away there. But I was impressed by Florida. I think Florida looked way better than I expected them to. I thought there would be some more issues potentially with some of the parts of their roster. It's a predominantly Korean roster with then RuPaul and Sana kind of thrown in there. Sana came in for a map and actually just pounded the day after he flew into Florida. So I think this team looked very good. London, they lost a map to the Vegas Eternal. To be fair, it was a map where they put in Lethal and Skyripa as their only maps they played throughout the entire Pro-Am. So I don't think either of them have had a lot of time to play with each other. I know Backbone was playing on ping. I think he is just now finally making his way to the U.S. Last week at some point in time. I don't remember exactly when. So it's an interesting roster for sure. I think there's certainly some kind of intrigue there and some interesting stuff going on with the team. But I think ultimately, when you really look at this kind of matchup, I think you have to favor Florida. I think they looked a lot better. I think Merit and Checkmate looked very, very good as a duo. I think someone is just more versatile on the tank role than what you have with Hottie. Hottie, this team really wanted to run a lot of Reinhardt. That's kind of their forte. I think that Ramatra right now is the better composition. A lot of teams have been opting to run Ramatra. I think someone on Ramatra is better than Hadi. And I just think the support line for Florida is really, really good. Chorong and RuPaul both have been very, very impressive parts of this team. So for me, it's honestly kind of a one-sided affair. I don't think it's entirely one-sided. I think there are some... I think there is room for the London Spitfire to play to their strengths in a way that I think is very, very good. London knows what they're good at, so I think if they can force maps where rush is a lot better, Kings Row is a pretty big rush map historically, but any map that they can kind of push and force that you kind of have to force a rush playstyle to work better can work to their advantage. Generally speaking, I prefer the Mayhem in this series, and so I'm going to give them the win 3-1. I think that is just really, in my opinion, that is just kind of what they are as a team. I think they're more complete. I think they've looked better. They've had higher highs. I think London's one of the 2 weakest teams left in the Pro-Am. And so for me, I just don't have a ton of faith in them getting over a Mayhem team that I've actually been very, very impressed by so far. Moving on, we have the Boston Uprising, winners of Group C, versus the Toronto Defiant, who were the runners-up in Group D. Boston Uprising, of course, 4-0, plus 8 in map differential. They did not drop a single map on their run, with wins over the LA Gladiators, the Washington Justice, Wisp, and Team Peps. Whereas the Toronto Defiant finished 3-1 with a loss to the Houston Outlaws, a very close series, and then wins over the New York Excelsior, the Twisted Minds, and Redbird Esports. So I think that group was very interesting, the one the Defiant were in, and they almost beat Houston. It was a very, very close series. I think Toronto kind of choked a bit, C9'd, and then lost on push. But they definitely could have won that series. It was a very, very close series. I think Toronto is a very good team who has been challenged, who has been pushed. They were pushed to some degree by New York, though they did come out pretty dominantly at the end of that series to take them down. And they certainly had challenges when playing against Houston Outlaws. And some of it, I think, is that the Toronto Defiant versus Houston Outlaws is a matchup that the Defiant can take some advantage of currently. And we'll talk about Houston for the next game. I think Toronto has very, very strong compositional choices. Certain compositions that I think they, generally speaking, are much stronger than a lot of the league. If you can get, for example, Circuit Royale, where you can run double flex support and Sigma, for example, like that's a very good composition for Toronto, because you have Kaluge is one of the best, if not the best, Sigmas in the league. You have really good double flex support compositions with Ultraviolet and Server Jed, though he's still playing on ping. And I think that damage-wise, Hydron looks very, very good, and Sam and Speedily also look very good in kind of that secondary kind of supporting role as well. So I do think that the Toronto Defiant have compositions that they look very, very good in. The Boston Uprising, I thought, looked incredibly impressive, and I think they are one of the most meta-resistant teams in the game. They have 2 tanks that I feel very good about, though they did not look as good with Kalios in, though they won the map that he played. Smurfed Me, very, very, very good, very well-rounded. I was very impressed by the support line, because we saw the entirety of that support line. We saw a lot of Twilight, and then we saw Lijigon and Izayaki switching from Control to the hybrid maps. And Decay and Birdring both looked like some of the best we've seen from them in a long time. So that made me very confident in the Uprising as a team. And to me, I look at this matchup and I think that the benefit that the Defiant have is that there are certain metas that they are going to be better at, and certain types of compositions I think they benefit from. But generally speaking, across the board, I think the Uprising have just the man-to-man matchup advantage, which I think is hard to get by, right? I think Smurf is better than Kaluge. I think Kaluge is good. Smurf is just that good. I like Decay and Birdring. Last week impressed me a lot. As good as I think Hydron is, I think that he does not beat Birdring. And I would say the same with the flex damage spot. Decay was really, really good on Tracer, and I feel way better on Tracer with Boston than doing anybody on Toronto. And then support line-wise, give me 3 Grand Finals winning supports, please. So tough. It's a close series in some capacities. I don't think Toronto's going to get swept. I just do not see it happening. I think they're too good for that to be the result. But I do ultimately think that it will go the way of the Boston Uprising. I'm going to say a 3-1. Like I said, there's certain maps that I think the Defiant can try to force to give themselves compositional advantages. But I don't think it's going to be enough for them to overcome Boston in a full series. And so that, to me, is a big part of why I am favoring the Uprising. The next game is very, very interesting. It is the Houston Outlaws and the San Francisco Shock, 2 teams that I think have shown some clear potential weaknesses in this event so far. The Shock's weird kind of tank choices and what tanks are playing what players playing what hero and whatnot, but also playing on ping, so their coordinations seemed a little off. Houston Outlaws had some weird games. Obviously, against Toronto, they struggled a bit, managed to kind of pull that one together. They lost a map to Twisted Minds, maybe because they were trying to match, but also because I don't know if they fully have everything. They ran a weird composition in their last match, though I think at that point in time they'd already locked up the number 1 spot, so I think they didn't really just care about showing strats, and they're trying to hide some stuff. So these are 2 teams in weird spots, and it's hard for me to kind of judge them fully, because I don't know what we're going to get out of either of these teams this upcoming week. Things that we do know is that the San Francisco Shock are still playing on ping. Andy Miller came out and said that the reason why this team was not in the U.S. yet was a housing issue. It was not a visa issue. They had their visas. They just couldn't get to the U.S. Because of a housing issue, but he said that they're going to be coming to the U.S. next week. So after the Pro-Am, they'll be coming back to the U.S., which makes sense. There's no reason to get them here before the Pro-Am, make them all jet-lagged, then, hurt them in that way. It's better just let them play and then have them travel afterwards. Houston, I don't know if Gargoyle is in the U.S. or not. I have seen nothing that leads me to believe he is. I don't think he was a part of their media day or anything like that. So there are a lot of questions about these teams. I think that you have to favor Houston if you think ping is a big deal, which to some degree I think it is. Though I don't necessarily think that ping is the end-all be-all. I think that there are reasons why ping can be an issue. Sometimes ping's really not that big of a deal. In something like this, we were up against the best teams in the world on a pretty consistent basis. Yeah, I think ping is going to have a big kind of impact on their success. But I do think these are two good teams. I actually think this series could be pretty close, mainly because I think the Shock just have that very, 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 strong X factor, which is Proper, who's a really good player, and he looked way better. I think that as the tournament progressed, despite the fact they were playing on ping, despite the fact that they were playing not just on ping, but also the fact that they were playing as a they were playing in a very interesting way, right? They improved, they made compositional changes, they put Proper on different roles as the series kind of went on. They put him on Tracer, and they put Hisang on Sombra instead of Hisang on Sombra, or Hisang on Tracer. So they made changes as time went on. So you can tell that not only that they were not just lacking coordination and playing poorly because of ping, they also just did not have a composition and whatnot that they felt super comfortable with. So they changed a lot of what they did, and they rolled the Titans, and they rolled Timeless is actually closer than they probably would have liked. They've had a whole extra now 2 weeks to practice and kind of get their stuff together. And I think that they should be much better this weekend. I absolutely would not be surprised if the Shock made a run in this tournament. I think they're a very, very good team. I don't buy into the idea that just because they looked bad 2 weeks ago, they're going to look bad again. I think that they've had time to prepare and get kind of ready. They know what they're kind of up against at this point in time. And so I think this series will be very, very close. I think it's going to be a very close series. I think map picks heavily favor what you can do. And I think that this series is going to be very, very close. However, I do think that Houston's, the fact that Houston's not playing on ping, the fact that Houston has been able to kind of play together, they're in one place. They've been able to kind of develop some of that team synergy. I do think that ultimately will be the thing that tips them over the edge ever so slightly over the Shock. But I think this is the closest series of this first round. But I think it goes the way of Houston Outlaws in a 3-2 score. I have seen some people say it's going to be a roll. It's going to be a one-sided series that the Outlaws just completely destroy the Shock. I don't see it. Even on ping, I think the Shock are going to compete because they can play the way that they want. And they'll be able to pick maps that go the way they want. I think that is a huge plus for them. Final match in round one is the Atlanta Reign versus the Los Angeles Gladiators. This, to me, is probably the most one-sided game in this first round. I think the Gladiators are an interesting team. I like a lot of what they've done, but the showing from them was not the most impressive. I did not think that I didn't think Kai looked particularly strong. Kevster still looks very good. Babel looks good. I have concerns about Dante. Funny Astro didn't look incredible. I think this team is still trying to get a lot together. I know Dante said that some of the team didn't even get to the U.S. until very recently, so this is a team that I think is still trying to get everything going, get everything together. I don't think they have fully figured out their synergy yet and their coordination yet. I still think there's stuff to work on there. I still think there is reason to believe that this team is still getting a lot of its stuff together. But to me, the Atlanta Reign are the better team, right? Lip looks incredible. Stalker looks really, really good. Chio Fielder also still looks very good. Vigilante looks good. Donghack and Hawk both look very good. The Atlanta Reign look very, very, very good. I think they are one of the strongest teams in this tournament. So to me, 3-0, I think they win the series with ease. What I will say on the Atlanta Reign, and this is a point that I think a lot of people need to consider when you look at the overall kind of situation across this tournament so far. the Atlanta Reign were not challenged in their group in the Pro-Am. They had the easiest group, I would say, by far of any team in the Pro-Am. Their group consisted of basically 3 contenders teams, because they had Saints, who lost one of their most important pieces to the LA Valiant. That same LA Valiant roster, who had been put together essentially a week before the Pro-Am started. And then the Vegas Eternal, who were arguably the worst showing of any team in the Pro-Am. And then London, who, like I said, I think is one of the bottom 2 teams left in the tournament alongside the LA Gladiators. So to me, the Atlanta Reign really didn't have to try very hard to get where they are. They won their group with ease. They didn't drop a map because they weren't really pushed that hard or challenged that much. So I do think that is important to take note of, that it is very possible that this Reign team could look significantly worse or shockingly worse going into this weekend, because we just expect them to be very, very good, because we've seen them perform very, very well up until this point. And all of a sudden it's like, wait, this team looked incredible last week. How come all of a sudden they seem like they're struggling more? There's certain things that they're not doing as well. And I think that they really have not been challenged very much. I don't expect that to be a huge problem, but I want to throw it out there and say that the Reign had a very easy walk to get here, so they're how good they look could be deceptive. And I will leave it at that as we move on to the second round, where we have the Florida Mayhem versus the Boston Uprising. Now, like I said, I like both of these teams. I have no upsets so far, but that's really just kind of where I think things are. This, to me, is a match that should favor the Uprising for a couple of reasons. One is, I think the Uprising have the advantage in the tank battle, and the tank battle is very, very important. And as much as I like someone, I think he's a good player, I would favor Smurf. I think that what we saw out of Birdring and Decay was very, very impressive, and is pretty equivalent to the peaks that I see from Merit and Checkmate. I think Merit's Sojourn was very, very good last year. I don't know if we're going to see much Sojourn, and I think that on Cassidy, Birdring does take the edge. And then specifically the support line, I like the support line for Florida. I think Chorong looked very, very good, and I think RuPaul's looked very good. But I think Boston's support line is so incredible. Twilight made so many plays. Lee Jae-gon was making plays. Izayaki was making plays. I think it's really hard to be better, especially because Boston has the ability to, I think, outplay you in a main support flex support meta, and also outplay this Florida team in a double flex meta. I don't think that Chorong and RuPaul are going to match up to Izayaki, Twilight, and double flex. So I think compositionally, in terms of different metas and different types of compositions, Boston just has more flexibility. I think has the advantage in that way. I don't think it's going to be a roll. I think it's going to be a very close series. I could definitely see the series being similar to a lot of what we saw with Boston against the Gladiators, or even Boston versus Washington, where the score was one-sided in terms of, Boston won both of those series 2-0, but a lot of the maps were pretty close, even if they weren't, losses for them, even if they didn't drop any maps. They had close games and close series. So I could see, even if this is like a 3-0 or 3-1, which I don't think it'll be 3-0, either way, depending on which team wins, I could definitely see it being like it's a 3-1 or a 3-0, but every single map was close. The team that won was just that much better every single time. Just slightly better. They were able to pull it out more. With that being said, I do think Boston should be favored to win this game. I believe in this Boston roster more than I thought I would. I honestly thought that this team would disappoint me. I thought this team would not be nearly as good as what they looked like on paper. On paper, this team looks like it should be really, really good. And they looked it, certainly, when we saw this matchup, or we saw them last weekend play. I also do want to say, if the top seeds all advance into the second round, it's cool because none of those teams have ever won a tournament before. Atlanta's been good, Houston's been good, Boston's been good, Florida's been good. All of them, except for Houston, have played in a finals before. But none of them have won. So that is pretty interesting. So that's something I would like to see. Someone new win something. That'd be cool. Moving on now, Houston Outlaws, Atlanta Reign. Very, very good game. I think this game will be very, very good. And I think a lot of it comes down to kind of peak play. Like, to me, the benefit that the Houston Outlaws have in this series is I think that they are just significantly better when it comes to playmaking ability on Winston. If you can play Winston at a high level, I think you can do well in this current meta. I think Atlanta across the board is probably ever so slightly better on every single role, except for maybe the support line, which is very, very close as well. Like Geo Fielder Vigilante is really, really good. Violet and Shu is also very, very good. Shu looked really, really good this past weekend. Violet, I have my concerns for him as a main support, but in double flex, I mean, Violet Shu might be the best double flex line in the league, and Vigilante Fielder is right behind that. So I think it's going to be a pretty close match. But like I said, I think the big advantage really comes down to Houston with Fearless on Winston. I think he has the playmaking ability that could be harmful and could cause some problems for Atlanta. I don't love Hawks Winston. I don't love Donghawk's Winston either in comparison to Fearless's. I mean, Fearless is so good on the hero. But I do think Atlanta has shown better coordination. I think they have more flexibility. I think, importantly, they're better on more compositions. I think right now, if Gargoyle is not with this team, I think Atlanta has more kind of ability to play things at a higher level. They can force Sigma maps. They can force Diva maps. They can force maps that benefit Doomfist more. And in those types of compositions, I expect Hawk to be better. If Ball is a really viable option, then you can run Ball pretty well. Donghack, I don't even think was in Atlanta when they were doing their first round games, and he is now. So this team is together now. I think we're going to see an interesting look. I do think Atlanta should be fine, and I think they should win this series, but I definitely think it's going to be close. I think that when you have the ability to really kind of force map picks in your favor, and you can kind of find the things that your team is better at than the other team and pick maps around that, I think it always makes for really good matches. So I think Houston's going to be in a tight 2 games here, but I just don't think they can pull it out over a Reign team that has shown me more. They're a little bit more flexible. They have more resilience in terms of like ability to match different metas and different styles. And so to me, the Reign should be the favorite to win that side of the bracket. I do think that's the tougher side of the bracket. I think having to get over the Gladiators and then either Outlaws or Shock is significantly harder than what the Uprising would have to do getting through Toronto and Florida. That's just my take. I think that there's an argument to be made that like 3 of the top 4 teams are all on one side of the bracket, because I rate the Shock very highly, even though they struggled. Houston looks very, very good. Atlanta looks really, really good. Boston, to me, Florida's good. Florida's maybe 5, but I think London and Toronto are a little bit further down, and so I do think that Boston has a slightly easier path here than the Atlanta Reign would. And if we get our Uprising Reign finals, which, I would love it. I hope it is a 7-map banger. I hope we get a great Pro-Am finals. I think it would be a really good way to get us into the season. This incredible 7-map banger between 2 teams that just look really, really good. 2 almost super teams really kind of thrown together. Really, like the 2 teams that went really big when trying to build the best possible teams. So this, to me, would be a really cool match. I really want to see games we haven't seen before, so I'm hoping we have minimal upsets, honestly. Because if there's 0 upsets, every single game we get in this tournament will be a new game, right? And there's also the possibility of getting those anyway, right? Like if Toronto were to beat Boston and Florida were to then beat Toronto and, Shock beat Houston, but Atlanta beat Shock, like that would still be new games, but guaranteed only games we haven't gotten before if we get no upsets. So I'm hoping Boston versus Atlanta is a really close series. I think both of these teams are very good meta-wise. I don't think there's a ton of holes in either of these teams. I do have certain areas that I think there are like slight preferences. Like I said, in these roster breakdowns, I don't love Boston in like a hard flex DPS meta, like a Genji. Like if Genji's like a must pick, I don't love them in a meta like that, but we're not in a meta like that right now. It's a lot of Cassidy and Tracer. I think both of these teams are excellent in that. I think it's a lot of Winston, something that I think both teams are pretty good at. I think Boston's the better Winston team with Smurf, but I think the complete package of Atlanta is very, very impressive. I think Lip is just really, really good right now, and I think he is a very, very, very early favorite to win the MVP, or at least one of the early favorites. And the support lines, these are 2 of the best in the region, in the league right now. So I think this would be a great finals if this is what we get. I hope it goes the distance. I hope it's a 7-mapper. I, right now, have more faith in the Atlanta Reign to take it. I think they look really, really good, and I think the fact that they've had some extra time to practice will work in their favor. And so give me the Atlanta Reign to win the Pro-Am. There you go. That's my bracket. That is what I am picking. That is how I think it will go this weekend. But who knows? Maybe it goes a different way. Maybe you think somebody else will win this weekend's Pro-Am. So let me know in the comments down below what you think will happen, who you think will take it, how you think it'll go, whatever. I would love to hear from you in the comments down below. But that is all from me for today. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video and would like it in the future, consider liking and subscribing. And as always, hope you're all staying safe and staying healthy. And until next time, bye-bye.